This video is going to be a bit of a hot take, so I hope you're ready. I think the biggest lie that we have been told as a generation is this myth of a career. That you need to be working in the same industry, developing the same set of skills, all so that you can then continue to get promotions. So that way you have financial stability, you're not going to go homeless, you'll find a spouse, you're not going to be a virgin, you'll have friends, you'll have social standing, and so that you're just not a failure in life. Obviously, I'm kind of joking when I say this very flippant description of career, but I don't think it's too far off from a lot of the negative ways that this idea of career has influenced us and the people around us. I personally was impacted by it because this idea of career is what led me down a career path that I didn't enjoy. And it took me many years of struggling and not fitting in to finally let go of it and then choose a more unique path for myself. And the 4 years since I've done that have been amazing. I've done 3 really cool things that I can talk about later, but that involved living in different countries, working different kinds of jobs, and prioritizing different things in my life that have brought me a ton of happiness, joy, fulfillment, and even financial stability. And so today's video is me condensing many years of the struggling that I went through and the thought processes that I had to cycle through into a short video so that way you can go through the same thing if you find yourself in the same situation. Today we'll talk about why do I think this idea of career, which I label as the new religion, came about. We'll then talk about the different elements of career so that way you can be mindful of how to break them or how to adjust them to what you want. And then we'll talk about the 3 insecurities that I think lead people to thinking about career in a way that is very constraining and toxic. So that way you have a blueprint on how you can combat these things and then allow it to serve you rather than the other way around. And if you're new here, my name is Neil. I have historically made videos about consulting and how do you get in from a non-target school. But as I've matured and gone through my own, professional maturity journey, I make videos that are about the lessons that I've learned that have allowed me to mold my career to get the things that I want out of life so that you can hopefully do the same. Okay, so let's talk about this idea of career and when it came from. If we rewind the clock all the way back, we of course get to people who were hunters and gatherers and eventually farmers. And this idea of career was like not a thing. They were just doing what they did so that way they could get food on the table, so that they wouldn't starve, and so that way their family would still be alive. And I think that was largely how humans lived for 99.9% of our existence on this planet. It wasn't until we started to have technologies, like being able to have agriculture at scale, that then fewer and fewer percentages of the population could feed the rest of us. And that allowed for specialization. So then people started to make hats or make glasses or make pottery and stuff like that. And this is something that we've seen over the last hundreds of years, right? Thousands of years. If you go into any museum about Asian history, you'll see pots from 6th century BC China or India or something like that. But yeah, specialization came about, and I think it ramped up especially heavily after the Industrial Revolution, where we started to get more industries and exponential impacts of labor and technology, and such that in the 1900s we started to get an overabundance of calories and food, especially in America and other developed countries. This, I think, combined also with the fact that after World War II, people in America started to really focus on education, higher education, because of the GI Bill, which allowed veterans and their families to be able to go to school and university for free. And so that really boomed the college and university scene within the US, which probably had trickle-on effects around the world, such that people started to go to college a lot more. And then that's when you also start to get the rise of these professional careers, right? That's when, around the 40s and 50s, I believe, is when McKinsey started to come about, a lot more accounting firms started to come about, and you just started to get more complex and advanced financial and economic industries. And I think that's probably what led to the then importance of career, of someone going to university so that they can then get a cushy job in one of these corporations and then stay in that corporation and rise in the ladder to get a very good life, right? And that's where you start to also get stories like people who might have joined Ford, the car company, in the 40s or 50s as just a secretary or an executive assistant, might have stayed there for their entire career, and then she or he retires at the age of 65 with hundreds, thousands, if not millions and millions of dollars of these shares that have appreciated. And so, of course, this idea of career, of staying in one place, sticking it out for 40 plus years all at once, makes a lot of sense because it's super attractive and leaves you with a really good value. I think that value and that exchange is a lot more dubious nowadays. And also, we have a lot more optionality. But despite that, I think we more now than ever think about career as a religion. And what I mean by that is it's the central node or the central aspect of our life that dictates and runs everything else. We think about if we want a family, what does that impact on the career? If we want to do this or that, what is the impact on the career? In a way that 50, 60 years ago, that central thing might have been religion, right? What does my religion, its philosophy and values say? And then what does my community around that religion say? We're humans, so we're always going to need something that gives us purpose and gives us community. It's just now that seems to be career more than it seems to be anything else. And that gets us into what are the elements of career. If we're talking about this word so much, and especially the more negative connotation of it, so that we can then combat it in our own lives, let's talk about what it is. I think there's 6 elements, or 5 or 6 depending on how you count it, that make up this modern day notion of career. I think the first one, and I have it here on my laptop, so if I'm looking over there, it's because, you guys look great. I'm just looking at my laptop real quick. But the first one is that it's a linear path. that it is supposed to follow this neat upward trajectory, similar to how as a consultant you go from consultant to manager to partner. If you're a doctor, you go from medical student to resident to then attending the specialist, chief resident, or chief attending, or whatever it might be, and you do the same for all these other career paths. The second one is that it needs to be a single story, or an easily explainable story, that it needs to make sense to the people who are looking at it from the outside, that it can't have any disjunctures or any random bits that don't make sense. The third is that it always needs to be upward, that your salary, your title, prestige always need to be increasing at a steady pace, that you can't be taking any steps back or taking any steps sideways. The fourth one is that it's never off, that you always have to be contributing to it, almost like you always have to be feeding your pets, right? You can't take a day or a week off. Maybe in some respects you might be able to take a couple weeks off for, in between jobs, but generally you should always have something lined up next, and you shouldn't really ever take too much time off, because that might be a blemish on your resume that you can never overcome. And then the last one is maybe two parts, but it's that it's the default priority, and that it's also the thing that you identify most strongly with in your identity. If your identity is like a pie chart, it's like the biggest piece of that pie. But if I were to summarize all 5 of those points, I think what they lead to is an idea that is very constraining. And I think we can go one by one again and explain why. I think the first one, if we think about the linear path, I think that ignores the fact that we as people are multifaceted, that we are going to have different interests and strengths and passions that arise and fall throughout the course of an entire full life. And it's silly to not think that we would then go pursue those passions in the thing that we are doing the most, which is our job. I think the second one, the single story, is also silly for the same reason, in that we do things that might not be explainable. For example, I have loved learning Mandarin for the last 6 years, but if you were to ask me why I love learning Mandarin, I can't give you a real answer. Any answer I give you is just some story that I've, retrofitted on this passion that I've just found myself to have. And I think a lot of people have those things, whether it's, athletics and running ultramarathons, whether it's sports, whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it's knitting or crocheting. There's a variety of things, endless number of things that people do that they just love doing just cause. And you don't necessarily need it to be explainable to other people for your interest in the thing to be valid, or for you to want to pursue a career out of it. I think the next one, the always upward part, is, I think, dubious for a lot of reasons. The fact that, your career and your life is more like a game of chess, where sometimes you have to go backwards or you go sideways to then move forward at the end of the day. This principle of career doesn't count for that, and is always going to give you that pressure of, if I'm making this much, I can never make lower than that again, which is just a silly concept, especially if you're making a lot of money. If you're making $400,000 and you then go and make $200,000, like, you will be okay. The next ones, or the last ones, of it being never off and being part of your identity, I think are, of course, ignore the fact that we are not always our work, and that we will, as humans who want to have a full life, prioritize other things, and also want to have other aspects of us that make up who we think we are and who we are to the people around us. And so I think these are all the reasons why the traditional notion of career that we are given, and that we by default are programmed with, if you will, can be quite toxic and quite negative for one who wants to live a life that is genuine to oneself. But then the question becomes, why? Why do we then adhere to it? And what can we do to give ourselves more freedom and unconstrain ourselves? I think the biggest thing is understanding the 3 insecurities that I believe lead people to feeling like they need to subscribe to this notion of career. So what are these 3 insecurities? Because if you want to understand how to unshackle yourself, you need to understand where the shackles are, right? The first one is financial. And in some respects, this can be very valid. You either are actually just genuinely broke. For example, you have debt that you need to pay from graduate schools or undergrad, or you just have like a house loan or whatever it might be. And so those are very valid constraints. I think where it starts to become a insecurity that you need to deeply examine is if you do have a lot of money. Let's say you have savings, like you're a 25 or 30-year-old with hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings, or more if you're older than that. And again, I'm just throwing out numbers. These aren't necessarily, if you're not, a 125-year-old with $100,000 saved up, this is not meant for alarm. But I think the more important point is, if you don't have immediate financial stressors, or you're not in an obviously financially dubious situation, then I think it's really important that you understand. It's actually important you understand regardless. How much money do you actually need to live a life that you will be genuinely happy with? That's cutting out things like buying expensive or luxury goods, or things that are just purely wants. But it's like, how much money do you actually need to eat the way that you would want to eat for, a year, or where you want to live, or to see the people you need to see in a year, family, friends, etc. And then that becomes your baseline, right? Because anything above that is just money that you might not necessarily need. Of course, you should save, so you should factor that in as well. But I think every additional dollar or $10 that you think you need should be critically examined, because that then becomes a higher burden of the salary that you need to get, which then constrains or reduces the scope of what you can do in life, right? Like, imagine the situation. You're somebody who, with $1, you could get everything you needed for the year. You're not going to get the handbag, you're not going to get the luxury car, but you'll get your food, your housing, and all of the other needs paid for. Now, think about how free you are just needing to make $1. That means for, 99.99% of that entire year, you don't have to make any money, or you can do things and not care about how much money it makes you. And then for that 0.1% of the year, you just need to go make $1. Now, of course, that figure of $1 really is a much bigger number. It's really, you should think about it as a variable. Some people that might be $24,000, so $2,000 a month. Some people, because of how much they spend and how much they think they need, or how much consumerism that they adopt to or they subscribe to, that might need $100,000. And that then makes it such that they have to work so much harder just to meet their baseline, much less think about anything else that they want to do. And so I think a lot of this insecurity is being very laser focused on what is it that you actually need, and making sure that you're using your money to things that are valuable. I think a really good quote about this is, don't care about spending money, but I don't want to waste money, if that makes sense. And I think the difference between those two is how you alleviate this insecurity of financial. The second insecurity that people often have that makes them want to oversubscribe to that traditional notion of career is a lack of confidence or an insecurity around your skills and your own self-confidence. The idea that, oh man, I have this job now, whether it's in banking or consulting or whatever it might be, it's a great job, and I'm scared about leaving it because I don't know what I can do afterward. I don't know if I'll get another job. I don't know if my skills are translatable, so let me just stay now in the thing that I'm at, even if I don't like it that much. I think there's a quote out there which is like, the devil you know always seems better than the devil you don't know, which means that, okay, I know this now and it's a shitty situation, so it must be better than whatever potential hypothetical situation I could get myself into in the future. But I think that's a fallacy. And if anything, it's always generally false. That if you have a shitty situation now, whether it's a bad relationship, let's say, or a bad career situation, and you leave it, you knew the things that made it bad, and you can then be intentional about searching for the things that don't have those bad things. Like, how can you not find something better? And even if you don't find something better, you just find something that might be worse, and then you leave again, because you've already left the previous thing. Now, of course, it takes some financial security to be able to do this, and effort, but obviously everything in life takes effort, so that's actually not a constraint. But yeah, skills and confidence, that you should trust yourself. So my favorite rapper is a guy named J. Cole, and one of my favorite quotes from him is when he says something like, if I have the chance, I'm going to double down on myself every time. I'll put the quote on the screen so I can get it right. But I think I just love that, because that's what life's about, right? It's about taking chances and risks and putting that bet on yourself, because that's how you win. And I'm fortunate because I have a lot of friends who have done that. And yes, it's been tough for them. One of my best friends, Rohit, who I started this channel with, he quit Bain, a perfectly good job, to go start his startup, which was not certain, but he believed in himself. And now fast forward 3-4 years and he's doing super well. Much better than he ever would have done just by staying at Bain and loving it, and also becoming more of the version of himself that he's proud of and that he wants to be. And so I just want to see you guys to be able to do that too, and not be held back by an insecurity around your own skills or confidence. Now, the third insecurity that we'll talk about is the one I think you need to combat the fastest, because it is the one that matters the least, which is the insecurity around social stuff. What are people going to think? What are my parents going to think? What are my siblings going to think? What is LinkedIn going to think? Anytime you're thinking too much about what other people are going to think, you're in the wrong headspace. And I think it's especially true when you're trying to sort between things of, do I do it because I love it, or do I do the other thing because other people might think negative things about it? And part of that is because if people really love you or know you, they will support it. The second thing is that a lot of those people won't even matter. In 5 to 10 years, a lot of these people whose opinions you care about, they might not even be in your life. And then the third thing is, and the most important is, I think the opinion that you need to care the most about is your own. And that, because at the end of the day, that's what you're going to live with. And so I think just keeping that in mind will allow you to best combat this insecurity. And so I'll maybe end the video to prove to you that I'm not being a hypocrite, that I've actually done what I'm preaching today. I think there's two big examples that I want to give from my own life. I think the first one was when I actually left Bain to go work at a startup. So when I was at Bain, I was a senior associate consultant, and if I stuck around at Bain, given the Schwarzman Scholarship Program and some master's degree sponsorship I could have done, which basically is when you go do a master's degree and Bain will pay for it. Obviously the MBA, or the Business Administration master's degree, is the most common one, but they have these other specialty degrees like Schwarzman or some other law degrees that they'll sometimes pay for. Schwarzman is fully funded. And so if I was able to get that situation, then I would have gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars of value, or just not even value, just pure compensation as a result of it. But instead, I went and worked at a startup in Australia where I was making $60,000, $55,000 USD per year, maybe even less, and that's before taxes. So I think I took a literal 70 to 80% pay cut to go and do that. Yeah, so that was a big one where financial insecurities were creeping into my head that obviously were not real, because I was somebody who had a full ride scholarship from undergrad and worked at Bain for several years. So I had more than enough money saved up as a 25-year-old, and any additional money would not have significantly changed my life, and definitely would not have changed it on a day-to-day basis. I also faced some social insecurities there because my parents, especially my dad, he didn't understand it. And it makes sense, right? Our parents, especially if you're the child of immigrants like I am, their whole life was about chasing security, financial security, so that way they could give us an amazing life. And it's really hard to switch from that mindset in the same way that it'll probably be hard for us to switch from the mindset we have to our children, and we'll have to deal with that. But the mindset that they had couldn't compute why I would leave a company like Bain, where I could then go and, do a Harvard or a Stanford MBA, get it paid for, and continue making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, get the prestige, have a good lifestyle. Why would I leave that to go to a place I'd never been and work in a really uncertain situation of a startup that is in an industry that isn't even a thing yet in the world? It just didn't make sense. But for me, I knew that the people I met at the startup and the things that I would be doing were going to bring me closer to who I wanted to be, and they were going to help me develop skills and a confidence in myself that will allow me to then go on and do whatever I'd want to do in startups or corporate America or wherever it might be. And so I was able to take a bet on myself, and it paid off tenfold. The second time that I did what I'm preaching is right now. I actually left that startup about 2 months ago. So right now is, the end of October 2025. I left that startup 2 months ago, came back to the US, and I'm not going to look for another job for the next 6 to 9 months because I jokingly say I'm like mini retired, but it's because I'm grateful and fortunate that I'm in a situation where I don't necessarily need to be making money to support myself now because of the amount of money that I have that is like just in cash as well as in savings. And so instead, what I'm doing is prioritizing other things in life. I just was lucky enough to have a variety of things pop up on my calendar, like traveling with friends or being able to go visit India so that I could spend time with my grandparents, and also finally properly learn Telugu, which is an Indian language that my parents speak and where my family is from speaks. So that way I finally speak to my Nanama, which is my dad's mom. And I can also go separately and learn Spanish. So I'm going to Colombia in a couple days to go learn Spanish for 2 months, right? And so I'm able to prioritize all of these other things, which for me, because of who I am, is language learning and then time with family and friends. And then also I'll slowly start to search for the next thing in my career, let's say in 6 to 9 months. So that way in about 9 to 10 months, I'm starting a new role, ideally, that I love and I'm super excited by. But I've had a lot of people ask me this question around how do you feel nervous about it? Are you worried about not having a job for that long? Like, how can you be so confident you'll get a new job? And I think part of it is these insecurities are ones that obviously these other people would have for themselves that they're now projecting on me, but I don't need to accept them. And part of it is because I have financial security, which is really awesome and unfortunate. But then the second one is that because I have confidence in my skill set. I know what I've done in the past, and I know the person I am, and I know the value I can bring into an organization. And then I trust myself to be able to spend the 1, 2, 3 months grinding away, networking, reaching out to people, leveraging my network to be able to find that next role. And I don't want to let these arbitrary or fake insecurities, fake meaning like they're not actually in the world. It's not like someone has a gun to my head. These are all just, figments of a mind. I don't want to let them stop me from living a phase of life in a way that would be super exciting and something that I will only retrospectively look back on really positively. Damn, so that video was a bit rambly. I hope that it is a useful insight into how you can break apart this modern notion of career to better live a life that you're proud of, because that's ultimately what I want this channel to be helping you with. Also below, if you found this valuable, or if you found any of the other lessons that I talk about valuable, then I'd love to talk to you, especially if you are somebody who finds yourself stuck in a situation in life where you don't feel like you're able to express your true desires or your true authenticity because of these constraints that you might have or you might be finding yourself within. Below, you'll see a link where you can sign up for a free one-on-one with me for 15 or 30 minutes, I forget how long. But in that, I'd love to get to know you, chat about what you want to do with your life, so that way we can get you there faster. So I hope to chat to you all soon. Peace.